Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the third installment of Insane Budget Streaming. As you can see, I am now streaming from almost complete darkness, and there is two reasons for that. First of all, I'm testing another camera from the same manufacturer, ELP, that makes all these cameras that I'm using, and this one's got an IMX322, I think, chip, which provides even greater low light performance, but at the cost of a little bit of washed out colors, as you can see. Even though I'm lighting myself with a natural white temperature of my LEDs, I'm still kind of washed out, yellowish, greenish. So I do not recommend this camera for regular streaming unless you are streaming in complete darkness, because as you can see, if I turn off the camera, you can still see me even though my room is practically unlit. I mean, there is a very small lamp that's at the corner of the room, but that sure is not providing any lighting on my face, but as you can still see me. And I can even open the aperture more, and now you can see me very, very well. Of course, like I said, the colors are washed out, but you know, it is what it is. So let me turn this down a little so we are not overexposed when we turn on the lights again. And let's go to our main attraction today, and that is going to be the LED lighting. So I'm quite happy with the setup I have today, because I have been working maybe months on it. And I used to have an overhead panel that I had mounted over my primary display that was created from an old discarded LCD panel that was broken. So I just removed the LCD panel from it, and I just used the background, basically the backlight layer with all that Fresnel layers and whatever. There's a good YouTube video that I'm gonna link downside from DIY Perks, I think. Really greatly explained video on how to make one of those. But that position had a little bit of a problem, because since it was overhead, my chin was doing like nasty shadows on my neck, and it looked very unnatural. Whereas if I have like this, I'm basically having like all around lighting all over my face. And when you're doing podcasts, you can buy these cheap circles that you can mount around your cameras. And of course, if you're talking directly to the camera, that would help. But since I am basically streaming video games playing, I'm looking at the monitor, so I need something around the monitor. And I got a 27-inch monitor, so you know, no way in hell am I gonna get a panel that is big enough. And also, it would kind of you know, overexpose me, and also kind of blind me, since I am playing sometimes games that have dark spots in them, and then it would be all this light around me. So I made up a compromise here. I bought a COB LED strip that I basically taped, because it comes with adhesive tape on the backside, right? So I taped it all around my screen, my monitor. So I'm now gonna switch to another camera where I'm going to show how it looks. So this is the setup in action. And as you can see, there is some joints that I soldered, and also these cables are not normally here. They are here just for the purpose of the video, and we'll get to that later. But as you can see, basically this is the setup. So I got this tape around the monitor. I can switch it off, and now it's just a regular monitor, of course. And the place where I'm doing the switching is this box. Now, we should probably talk about how we actually drive LEDs, because this is going to be the main focus of our video. When you have a LED strip, that strip is basically, it comes with like pre-applied resistors directly on board. So all you need to do is provide 12 volts of power. Of course, if you give it like directly 12 volt, it's going to be very bright. In fact, I'm just driving this at 23% now, and it's bright enough to light my face. And I even have to close the aperture of my camera a little, so I'm not overexposed. So really, these LEDs are really bright. And the way we drive these LEDs is by PWM, and that stands for pulse width modulation. What it means that instead of lowering the voltage on that LEDs, we are basically keeping the voltage 12 volts, but what we are doing is switching it on and off very quickly. I mean, it's not, in ideal case, it would be on and off, so basically like a square wave, where like a portion of the cycle is on and a portion of the cycle is off. In reality, there's going to be some dampening on that wave, so it's not going to be exact square wave, but that's good enough, as we will see with an oscilloscope. So the ratio between the first part of the wave that is on and the second part of the wave that is off determines how bright we perceive the LED strips, even though they're basically switching between full power and no power. Okay, so you can get these regulating circuits in like regular hobby shops, or even like I think IKEA has some of those. It's like a basic accessory to wherever you're using LED strips or LED modules to light your places. The problem is that sometimes we don't have to just light the places to live in them. We need to light them to shoot some footage in them. And that's where the problem comes, because so your camera has a rolling shutter. I explained that in my first video. That means that the camera is basically scanning from top to bottom. It's going like this. Basically, it's mimicking the electron beam of the TV. It's coming from the topmost left pixel, and it's coming all the way down to here. Sorry, here, yeah. But it takes some time to scan that. And since the LED lights are flashing very rapidly, of course you don't perceive that, but they are. Sometimes when the camera scans the line, the LEDs are going to be off, and sometimes they're going to be on. And this will produce a nasty stripe pattern on your video. Now, as you can see, my video doesn't do that. But I will simulate the situation, and then I will tell you how to fix that. So I'm going to adjust my modulating circuit to a frequency that is more common for these regular. Oh, come on, that was too much. For these regular regulating circuits, and now as you can see, we got the problem. So right now I'm going to zoom in a little on my regulating circuit and adjust this, and also adjust the focus so you can see. So right now you can see both the LED strips and the panel behind it. And the display says basically we are running 23% duty cycle and 386 Hertz. What that means is that the frequency in which we switch on and off is 386 times per second. And each of the cycle has 23% on and the rest, which is like 77% off. Now, if I'm going to decrease the frequency even further, you're going to see the pattern is going to be more prominent, to the point where even my regular camera is going to pick that up. Of course, high refresh rate cameras are somewhat more sensitive to that. And as you can see, it also depends on the exposure. I'm going to artificially update the exposure on my main camera here, and you're going to see what it does to the video. So hold on. I'm now running at -5 exposure. What if I turn it to -6? Now, as you can see, the stripes are longer. -7, they are even longer. Which means basically the less you have exposure, the more of the portion of the video is going to be lit. Is going to be dark, because the camera is going to be off more often. And of course the stripes are moving, but at the certain frequencies you're going to find out that you can stop it. See, it's going up, and now it's basically at a fixed position. Now this is 169 Hertz, which is kind of weird. So let's go to half of that. Let's go to 80. Oh, hold on. I need to be a little bit more careful with this. I think we're unable to drive this at such a little frequencies. Let's try to, oh, there we go. Okay, maybe there's a minimum to that. So I'm not going to worry about that too much. But as you can see, there are certain frequencies where basically the speed of the switching matches some kind of multiply of that multiplication of the ratio which our camera takes. Of course, each camera's got it different. So as you can see, I got it tuned to my face camera, but if I switch to my secondary camera and I adjust the frequency, at some point I'm going to find another frequency where I'm going to tune it to the other camera, and we're getting close, as you can see, and there we go. So 182 is a multiply of that value, but now my face camera is blinking. So it's kind of difficult to combat this situation. And but as you can see, when I increased my exposure, the effect on my face camera became less prominent, since it's sort of blurring the lines together with the longer exposure. And that's really the same let's say pattern in which when you record like a movement, like a sport on an action camera, let's say, the longer your exposure time is, the more the motion is blurred, but also it's kind of blended together. Whereas if you lower your exposure, you get like sharp points. But if you got like a LED lighting, you might actually observe these patterns. And this is normal even if you're like recording from your mobile phone, some indoor scene, and you can basically see that some rooms have LED lightings that operate in these lower frequencies. The problem is, of course, now obvious, but what we will do about it. So I get a regulating circuits that I got from my local hobby store, and that was operating at about 700 something, let's call 780 hertz or something. So the effect was not too painful, but it was still visible on both my cameras. As you can see, it's both on my face camera and on my let's say utility camera, desk camera, I'm gonna call it now. So what I got is this circuit on which I'm configuring the frequency here. The problem with the common ones is that the frequency is basically preset. It's preset to the circuit and there is no way to adjust it. Whereas here I can adjust both the frequency and the duty cycle. So you might be wondering why I have all these wires here. So I actually got a mini oscilloscope. For those who do not know what oscilloscope is, basically it visualizes the movement of the waveform that drives the LED. So let me just switch it on here. It's going to take a couple of seconds. So this is of course just like the cheapest pocket oscilloscope that you can get on AliExpress, probably like $30 or something. And you can see even its internal LED displays got some interference with the camera. But it doesn't matter. We don't care how it looks. We just care that it will give us the information here. So right now I'm running it on quite a low frequency here. It's like 700 something. So I need to increase my time frame here so that the oscilloscope actually registers such a low frequency. I need to do it even more. Let's go with 1 millisecond here. And as you can see, it's recognizing the frequency to be 700 something. Of course, both the driving circuit and the oscilloscope are not like that precise. So there is some variation, but you can see clearly how the waveform looks like. Now observe what happens when I increase the duty cycle, when I increase the intensity of light. Now don't mind my face being overexposed, just watch the waveform. So as I am putting more and more percentage on this, more and more of the wave becomes at the top and less is left at the bottom. And ultimately, when I hit 100% lighting, it will just blend in one continuous wave, and it will basically just become DC voltage. And that's going to be full 12 volts here. Now as I decrease it, we are going to come back to the level where we were before, ultimately just lowering this even lower than when we were before. Of course, at the lower measurements, sometimes the oscilloscope loses track of the waveform. It no longer displays the frequency, but it still displays the waveform at its raw value. And now we're approaching 4%, 3%, 2%. Now it's very low lighting. 1%, this is basically nothing, and finally 0, and it just pauses, but there we go, it's just 0 voltage. So I'm usually driving this at like, I don't know, 11%, which feels very natural to do lighting, and also it doesn't like blind me when I'm looking at the monitor. And I of course correct for it with the aperture of my very, very sensitive camera here. So we've explained the duty cycle, but of course now we need to do something about that flickering. So the solution here is to have such a high frequency of the switching that even in between the individual lines that the camera is scanning, it's going to switch so quick that it basically blends together. So let me just put the camera back here again, and let's just increase the frequency. So we have now 1 kilohertz, 3 kilohertz, 4, 5. And sometimes when you're working with audio circuits, the switching frequency of the LED lights, since they're running all around the monitor and all around the wiring of your sound card and whatever, sometimes the sound card might catch the sound of that. I mean, I have a very good insulation, very good isolation of these circuits, but sometimes when I put the microphone too close, it still bleeds to the microphone. So what I like to do is use a frequency that is beyond human hearing capabilities, which basically means I'm running this at 25 kilohertz. So let's go even further. And as you can see, as we are approaching higher frequencies, the intensity of the light somewhat decreases. I think it has to do with the efficiency of the switching circuit that is not really able to keep its power, since there's like switching MOSFETs, but of course we can compensate for it with a higher duty cycle. So I'm going to keep this at 25 kilohertz, that's like spot on. And now, as you can see in the picture, there is no lines on my face. It's just super clear, exactly how it should be. Okay, of course. I put my oscilloscope on on my secondary display, and now the touchscreen layer is catching that. But as you can see, no stripes on my face whatsoever. So let's switch to the oscilloscope again, and let me show you what we can see on this. I'm going to switch to my secondary camera again. And we're going to have to adjust the parameters of the oscilloscope to a quicker time, so we can actually register such a high frequency of switching. Here we can go with skip. And as you can see now, it's pretty confused with the 1 millisecond value. But that's of course because we really need to 10 microseconds. And there you go. It's still sort of confused about the frequency. It's switching between 0, 12 kilohertz, and sometimes it's just registering the double of the waveform. But if we increase the duty cycle, it's going to catch on, and now it recognizes it's around 25 kilohertz. And as you can see, the waveform looks a little bit different in this fast switching mode. I think it's actually because hold on, we need to adjust the threshold here. It's because it's no longer easy to switch the circuitry in this super quick fashion. But of course, the circuit can still do it. But of course, I rarely use it at such a high value. I'm usually just going for the low tens. I rarely exceed 30%, and even with the 30%, I either have to close my aperture on my camera, or I would basically have to go into the camera setting here and just decrease the exposure, which is what we've talked about before. And now I can have it cranked up a little higher, whereas still keeping the picture not overexposed. And this might be a scenario where I want to light the room behind me also with my LED panel. As you can see, it works pretty well for that. So yeah, that is basically how you light your scene. When I have to summarize it usually doesn't make too much sense buying like pre-done solution unless you got a very, very convenient setup where you basically got the camera directly like in front of you. But since I'm streaming gaming and I got my display in front of me, I basically put a LED strip around it, and then I have a driving circuit from AliExpress, and I just put it in a nice little box with hold on, let me open this up for you. So I used to use this box for a different circuit, so I have some holes for additional buttons that I no longer have there. But basically there is just this hole at the top for that panel, and then there is this switch that just like disconnects the LED stripe from the circuitry. But of course there is also a button on it that allows you to manually disable it. The reason I have this switch is that I am actually not using any conventional like power source from like a wall socket power source for 12 volts, because I figured my computer already has 12 volts and pretty clean signal at that. So I'm basically just routing 2 cables from my computer case, running the 12 volts, so I minimize the amount of noisy stuff that I have plugged in my system. But that's like a pro tip. Of course, it requires some additional electrician knowledge, let's call it. So you can just use like a regular 12 volt power supply that you can get in any hobby market. And then you feed it directly to the circuit into the input terminals, and finally you plug the 2 wires from the LED strip to the output terminals, and that's really all that you need to know about how to wire up such stuff. And well, as you can see, it works really well. The image is nice and stable. There are no stripes on my face, and it is really just filling me with joy. So thank you for watching, guys, and of course don't be afraid to post me any question in the comments below, and of course I will link all the stuff that I have here. Bye for now.